Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome to the PT on Ice Daily Show. My name is Christina Prevett. I am one of our lead faculty within our pelvic health division. And today I want to talk about a brand new paper that I am so honored to be even a small part of that just got published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine that was talking about getting rid of medical clearance postpartum. So let's set the stage here. So first of all, this was a component of a very big project that is not my project, that is being taken on by Dr. Margie Davenport, who is my postdoctoral research supervisor. That is the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiologists Postpartum Return to Exercise Guidelines. So that number one is just a massive undertaking. She's been working on it for several years, and it gets published next month. As a component of that, there is also a new questionnaire that is being launched that is called the Get Active Questionnaire Postpartum. That is a screening tool for exercise professionals, again, being published through the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiologists. And then one of the last components, there was several systematic reviews that have already been published, and then there is this International Delphi Statement. So this has been a very big undertaking by some of my colleagues over the last several years. It is so exciting to see it coming finally to fruition and all of its component parts that are starting to be published. So this is kind of this arc. And then the reason for this statement was that what we see traditionally in practice right now is that there is a 6-week waiting period for individuals to see their doctor postpartum. And that is usually when medical clearance happens for returning to exercise. And what that means is that individuals are told to wait until they get that medical clearance before they are able to start engaging in more formal physical activity, going back to their gyms, etc., postpartum. That actually goes against the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecologists, who said that, some individuals are going to be able to start getting active 2 weeks postpartum. And for others, it's going to be 6, 8, 12 months postpartum before they're feeling very ready. And so there was kind of this discontinuity in recommendations and requirements for medical professionals. And then additionally, what at least I know I have been seeing in my own clinical practice is that there's been an inconsistency in what that postpartum checkup looks like. I'm sure if I'm talking to any pelvic physical therapist or occupational therapist on this call, you're going to have those examples where individuals didn't get a vulvar check, for example, at that 6-week appointment. And so what happened is that they wait 6 weeks and then they don't actually get their stitches even looked at. And then there isn't really a good understanding of what return to exercise guidelines look like. And this has kind of created this perfect storm of unease and discontentment in many of my postpartum individuals and for us as pelvic PTs and pelvic OTs, because now they're like setting up for this expectation and they're not being given any true guidance. And so in my clinical practice, what I've been saying is, that appointment is to look for lumps, bumps, retained stitches, and complications from a medical perspective. Like, they're not doing a functional exam on your pelvic floor. They are looking for strength, coordination, and nor should they be expected to. That's kind of the other piece of it. It's like we're setting this unrealistic expectation of what that appointment is. And what happens is that our physicians or our midwives are overwhelmed with the expectation of that appointment. And then our clients leave with this lackluster, I didn't get what I thought I was going to get around, advice for returning to movement. And so as a research team, the next step for us was saying, like, is this really necessary? Like, what are reasons that we would stop a person from exercising postpartum? And especially in that first year. And then, for us, we're thinking that very early, like sub 12 weeks period. As you can imagine, because this is so ingrained that we wait 6 weeks and do nothing, there really isn't a ton of research in the very early postpartum period around return to movement. And when we have these kind of scenarios where we are trying to hopefully push into different areas of practice or start opening up avenues for further research, we kind of have to get a lay of the land and understand, based on where our current evidence is, what are our clinicians' thoughts, our experts in the field thoughts on this area of practice. Because if we think about the triangle of evidence-informed practice, right? We have client belief systems, we have our clinician experience, and we have our knowledge base. And when that knowledge base doesn't exist, we have to lean on those other two camps. And that's why this Delphi was done. And so on the 7th of March, this was released open access in the British Journal of Sports Medicine. And it was a Delphi consensus statement that said, let's kind of revisit what are absolute and relative contraindications to exercising early postpartum. Is this medical clearance necessary? And then where do like pelvic floor considerations kind of come in? What the Delphi found, there was about 160 individuals, but most of them were pelvic PTs and obstetricians who were given a kind of like this survey and said, do you agree that this is an absolute contraindication? Yes or no. Do you agree that this is an absolute contraindication? Yes or no. And you had spaces for you to write, and then they looked at the level of agreement, took those other areas where there wasn't an over 80% agreement, sent it out again, and tried to build consensus over multiple rounds of surveying. And so then we kind of combined those surveys with what the current evidence says, and we give these recommendations in this paper. And so what they found, first of all, was that specific to postpartum, so vaginal or cesarean delivery, outside of that early wound healing phase in that first 2 weeks, when there's still glue on a cesarean scar, when there's still stitches around the vulva, outside of that, pending no complications, there is actually no absolute contraindications to movement or exercise that we could find in the postpartum period. And that is really huge. Like, we actually did not list any absolute contraindications to exercise in the early postpartum period. And what that means is that we are trying to remove these barriers. There were a couple of things that were placed as relative contraindications that went more into the medical space, but there was no absolute contraindication. So that is the first really big kind of finding of this paper. The second one that I really want to talk about here on this podcast, because it's so relevant to you all who are in rehab, is that there were no pelvic floor related relative contraindications. So none of the things that we oftentimes are checking for, really, right? Like leaking, heaviness, pain, were considered contraindications. And the language here is super important because when we put a contraindication in, it means that in order for you to continue to engage, medical screening or medical clearance, medical appointment is recommended. And so when we looked at where the body of evidence was and what we are thinking about from a postpartum healing perspective, none of the pelvic floor considerations were placed as a contraindication, relative contraindication to exercise. What they were placed as is reasons to get further screening. And so why was this? Why did this move from relative contraindications, which probably would be where we were at in the past, to a reason to screen? There's a couple of reasons. Number one is that for many, having those symptoms early postpartum is a natural part of the healing process. What do I mean by that? I would never assume that a person who gave birth vaginally or via cesarean is going to wait 6 weeks and then are going to have no signs, symptoms, or issues around the pelvis as they return to different levels of activity, right? There's going to be a healing arc that occurs where individuals, as they push intensities that they haven't exposed themselves to again postpartum, they are going to feel sensations around their pelvis, whether that is heaviness, whether that is incontinence. I wrote the section on heaviness in that postpartum period saying, we cannot rule out that this is delayed onset muscle soreness. They are going to feel those sensations. Making any of those feelings around the pelvis as a reason to seek medical assistance is setting a lot of women and people up for failure and creating an unnecessary barrier to postpartum return. And we know that as people edge into those symptoms, they are probably going to see some improvement. Now, where the screening comes in is we said, if individuals are seeing marked exacerbation of their symptoms with moderate to vigorous intensity physical activity, then it's time to probably get screened. And probably the most appropriate person to be screened by is a pelvic rehabilitation professional. Now, this wording is so important because what that does is twofold. Number one is it said that medical clearance postpartum without any complications is likely creating a bigger barrier and is actually a hindrance to individuals reconditioning in the postpartum period and can be harmful because there are significant issues with getting medical clearance. Like, not everybody is going to be able to see a doctor. Not everyone is going to be able to see pelvic PT. And this is one of the things that we had a big discussion about as an author group. I would love that everybody got to see a pelvic physical therapist or occupational therapist in the postpartum period. I would love to continue having research to have a pelvic PT as part of an obstetrical team, but we are not there. Right? Many of our pelvic PTs in the United States work in private cash-based practice, and many individuals postpartum are not being paid, right? There's a lot of unpaid maternity leave that is common in the United States. And so again, that creates a barrier. And so if they're saying that I can't do any exercise until I'm cleared by X person, but I can't afford, I don't have access, I don't have insurance for these individuals, then they don't exercise. And that's a huge barrier. And what that meant was that our guideline actually said that for a return to exercise perspective, medical clearance is not required. If there is a complication in the postpartum period, yes, right? And this is outside of like that early wound healing, especially for individuals after a cesarean. So where are we? So in terms of going for medical screening, what that medical screening was looking at was what created the Get Active Questionnaire Postpartum. And so it is aimed at medical providers as well as exercise professionals who are working with individuals in the postpartum period about potential reasons why they need to hold back, modify, or bring down intensity for physical activity in the postpartum period, which is exciting because it gives a much needed resource, one that many have been asking the research community for. And Margie definitely delivered, Dr. Davenport delivered. And what it does is it also allows for us to have a more nuanced conversation in the postpartum period where individuals are seeking care from their medical providers, but they're seeking the care that they are looking for, right? Lumps, bumps, and complications. And then we have an idea of what is our advice postpartum? And when we are talking about our postpartum thoughts as a pelvic division, we're going to have this postpartum return to sport guideline, which I think is fantastic. It's definitely going to be super helpful. And then additionally, we are huge advocates, right? If we can get in front of people 2 weeks postpartum, that's great. If we can't, right, and not everybody is going to have access, then returning to exercise postpartum is about frameworks over protocols. You're hearing me go off about a lot of our blanket guidelines in a lot of areas of rehab recently. And that is because I think that they can be overly conservative in nature, and for some individuals can be harmful because it slows down their progress. And what that means for us is that when we are thinking about returning to exercise postpartum, it's not about saying you can do X% at this time or run this distance at this time. It's let's get you to gradually return to movement. And here is what I want you to look out for. That is your body's whispers to you that it's time for rest, or that your body has done enough work for today. We need to recover and then expose again. And so what we want to be moving towards is navigational buoys over blanket protocols, because fitness going into the pregnant postpartum period matters. Goals, social supports, all these biopsychosocial considerations matter postpartum. But what we really do want to be encouraging is getting individuals moving at least low to moderate intensity in the early postpartum period to help against core reconditioning, reductions of pelvic girdle pain, perinatal mood disorders, and so many other outcomes that are better when individuals are engaging in movement early postpartum. All right, I hope you all found that helpful. As I said, that Delphi statement is open access. So if you go to the British Journal of Sports Medicine under latest content, you can click that link and it'll open up for you. You do not need a special PDF or email. I hope you all enjoyed that paper. There is so much coming out in the postpartum research space, the pregnancy research space. I have some news for you all that I am waiting on. And this will probably be my last time that I am on this podcast for Pelvic. I'm going to be here on Wednesday before we move into the app. So if you saw the Daily Show, it's going to be moving into our app away from Instagram and YouTube. So if you are looking for our rants, make sure you have an account. It's absolutely free. If you have already taken a course through ICE, then you already have access. If you are looking to see us live, Pelvic Live, then I am in Burlington, New Jersey with Shay this weekend. Rachel and Heather are going to be in Bellingham, Washington, April 11th, 12th, I believe. And then our summit, where all of our faculty are going to be there hanging out, is going to be May 31st in Raleigh, North Carolina. We are super excited. We hope to see you all, and we cannot wait to be geeking out about all this new research with you in real time. Hope you all have a wonderful beginning to your week, and we will see you all next time.